is from Canada. You'll be able to tell from her voice. And we have been friends forever. One of Susanna's books, The Shadowy Horses, when it was only published in Britain, it was one of our bestsellers. We kept importing it, it kept selling out. I loved it because it was a time travel book in a sense. But the really cool thing was the Roman centurion who appeared in modern Britain, there was only one person in modern Britain who could communicate with him. Why would that be? He was the only one that spoke Latin because he was in school. And I thought that's such a great thing because so often, you know, there's this like magical thing where whoever's come in from time to the present somehow speaks perfect English. Right? So it was great. Anyway, Susanna and I bonded again years ago in 2001, the year that the Diamondbacks beat the Yankees. You'll love this story. I am superstitious about it. So I said, when she called me and said, you want to come down to the bar and have a drink? My husband, my daughter, and Ian Rankin had gone to a sports bar. But my deal was I wasn't going to watch a Diamondback game, because if I did, they were sure to lose. So I said to Susanna, I can come down for a drink. I can't watch the game.
So she sat with her back to the television set. And baseball is the one thing in my family. Billy Martin was my dad's cousin. So baseball is the one thing in my family that we do know. And Barbara was so tense. I've never seen Barbara that tense. And every now and then a cheer would come up and Barbara would just, be really, really tense. And at one point I said, Barbara, it's okay, they're wearing white shirts. It's all right.
What she actually said is they're rushing out in the field and they're in white. And I thought, oh my God, they actually did it. It was so exciting. So that was our evening doing baseball. But subsequently, Susanna has now become a bestseller with her American publisher called Source Books. And she has continued to write her wonderful books, all of which are on different subjects. But why don't we tell them about your career as a museum person, because that informs part of the background for Bellwether.
Well, I started off, I was a museum curator before I got published. I always wrote from the time I was really, really small, but I was a museum curator before I got published, and I never gave that job to a character in any of my books because I always wanted to find out about other people's jobs and give those jobs to my characters. I thought they were much more interesting than my job. But for several years, I was the curator of a historic house museum, actually several houses. We had 12 buildings on several acres of land. And when I finally started getting the ideas that became the book Bellwether, I thought, gosh, it's been 20 years since I was a museum curator. I better find out how it has changed. And it had been, when I was a curator, we had just started computerizing our records and changing our card catalog over into, we had little interns that we hired for the summer to change our card catalog over into computer records. And I touched base with the director of the museum in Oyster Bay on Long Island, the museum that I kind of used for the book. And I was afraid that I would have to relearn all this stuff and sort of bring myself up to speed. And I walked up into her office and I thought, nope, I know exactly what's like down the middle of that pile there. Those are grant applications for funding. I know that's your board meeting minutes over there, and I know exactly what's on that side of the desk. And it was just like walking right back into my office. So it was like, oh, okay, I know how to do this one. I know exactly what to do. But it was really interesting to be able to give a character my former career and put that on the page.
What about the house? There's a very helpful diagram in the book. And the house obviously grew from, 2 rooms to more rooms.
When they originally built colonial salt box houses, that was how you build the house in the salt box houses. You would have your downstairs chamber and your upstairs chamber, and then when you got more logs and more money and more time and more family, you would build onto it on the other side of your fireplace, and the house grew in a very identifiable pattern. And you would add your bedrooms and everything upstairs, and then you would put a lean-to kitchen on the back. So I like to know where my characters are walking, and I also am a big fan of Agatha Christie. So I always love those. You know the Agatha Christie books where someone's walking down the hall and murders someone at the other end of the hall, and you go to the front of the book to see how they did it and who was going past whose room. So I actually did those floor plans. Those are mine. Those are
your very own.
Those are mine. I drew them, and the publisher, when they found out I had them, they're like, well, we're just going to put them in the book. So those are.
I think it's a wonderful idea. Now, they didn't have what we're referred to today as ensuite bathrooms. So clearly they dug a latrine. In Britain it's called the Jakes, out back. And as a little touch, what Rob and I were visiting Craig Johnson and C.J. Bucks, and there's Diana, in Wyoming. 1 second, let me finish this. And there is they showed us the outhouse for this rustic community, and it had a winter level and a summer level. So it was a 2-story outhouse, so that in the winter, when the bottom level was completely overcome, they went to the top level. They were so proud of it, they demonstrated it for us. Now, I have a photo which I will put on Instagram and show you. Diana, welcome. So lovely to see you. So we have chairs. I'm going to relinquish the microphone. And there you are. And I'll just find over here. I'm assuming I don't need to actually introduce Diana?
I can spell my name for you if you want.
There's no graceful way to get up on these, so I'm sorry.
No.
There's no.
And the worst part is that you could slide right off it. So put your arm happily around the back. All right.
Thank you.
So we were just discussing Susanna's role as a museum curator. You didn't miss a thing. Oh, you did actually. It was wonderful.
That would be the first thing upon learning that she is a museum curator, or has been, is that the kind of career where there's a set career path and you take courses and you get licenses, you get a junior position and work your way up? Or is it the kind where you just sort of stumble into it?
For me, it was I stumbled into it because I tend to fall into most things in my life, and I actually took international development and politics at university, and I got a summer job. I had different summer jobs at museums, and I got this one summer job at a museum at a time when I was trying to figure out what I was going to be doing at university, which way I was going to be taking my studies. Did I want to go into, foreign service with it? Did I want to go sort of more into kind of Peace Corps type stuff with it? And the summer job turned into an offer of a permanent job. And I really liked the museum I was working at. So I kind of thought, and I took the permanent job, thinking I can always go back and finish that degree, but I won't get a chance to do this work again. And at the time, there were certification programs that I could do from within the museum work, from within the job I did. So I did those. I did all the certification programs I could do, and qualified as much as I could from within what I was doing, and then it just sort of went from there. And one job offer led to another job offer, led to another opportunity, and before I knew it, I was a curator. And I was a curator at a fairly young age. So I would be walking into all these meetings and things with people that were, much older and had many more numbers and letters behind their names than I had. But I really absolutely loved my job, and it was something that I hated giving up. But after I finished my first novel, it was nonprofit work and writing are difficult to do because nonprofit work is odd hours and low pay. But also it's the odd hours. It's the fact that you're getting called back in to do events at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. My favorite writing time was kind of 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. So it was really, really difficult to do both. And so I just.
And then you had children.
I didn't have those until later. I just had the writing. But yeah, so that was why I left.
At least you knew what you wanted to do. Have you always wanted to be a novelist?
Yes. Yeah. But I never thought it was something I could make money. Never thought. It was something that in our house, I mean, I always wrote from the time I was really, really small. And I remember being really young and writing the great Canadian novel at the kitchen table when my mom was cooking, and writing the first chapters and handing them to my sister to read. And that was a pattern that went on through my teenage years. But it was always something that I assumed I would be doing another job and then the writing on the side. And because I grew up in a little town and there were no writers. Writers didn't come to our town, and they lived in New York, and they were very angsty, and they had very sad lives. And it wasn't my reality. They had unhappy childhoods. They were, it wasn't me. But my parents were always really supportive. My parents were always, whatever you want to do, and like you were always saying, right? So it was just whatever you want to do, you can do it. Just make sure you can support yourself while you're doing it. So when I got to be in my early 20s and I was working in the museum, mid-20s actually, my sister finally dared me to finish a novel that I was working on. She got tired of reading those first chapters, and she begged me. I think she knew that what was holding me back was fear, was that if you don't really try, then you can't fail. And she handed one back and she said, finish it. And I went, what now? And she said, I bet you can't. Yeah. She had every one of my numbers, and that's exactly. I dare you to finish it by Labor Day. And if you do not finish it by Labor Day, this was Easter. If you do not finish it by Labor Day, you owe me dinner at this ridiculously, wonderfully expensive restaurant in Pittsburgh where she was living. And I couldn't afford the dinner. It's the Grand Concourse, if anybody knows Pittsburgh, beautiful restaurant. Couldn't afford dinner at the Grand Concourse, so I finished the book. And she knew that once I had gone all the way through a book, that would be it. That would be it for me, and it was. So that's when I left museum art. Waitress for 5 minutes. Just because you still need to support the writing somehow, right? What book was it? That was a book called Undertow, which right now goes for a horrendous amount on eBay. Never pay that price. Promise me. Hand on heart, never pay that price. It's not worth it. It's a good book, but it's not worth a few $100s. It's not, but my next book that I wrote was Murrieta, which won the Catherine Dixon Fiction Prize. But Undertow was my epiphany book. I can do it. I can finish a book. This is what I want to do. Yeah. They are great. She was older. She passed 13 years ago, unfortunately, but she still is my little wind beneath my wings person. I think we all need that person that believes in you. And then my parents too. My parents, when I said I was moving home, I had been out of the house since I was 17. Because we moved around a lot, and my parents at the time were running a bed and breakfast, and the joke was that every Thanksgiving, everybody would sort of look at me and go, you look a little tired, you can always move home, ha ha ha, because they knew I never would, I was too independent, and at this time, they didn't know I'd finished a novel, and I was starting to think, well, how am I going to do the museum work and all the other stuff, and write, and I was sort of turning it over in my head. Said, you look a little tired, you can always move home. Great, fantastic, that's exactly what I'll do. See you at Christmas, and they kind of went, And I was home for 5.5 years living with my parents. I sort of effectively killed their bed and breakfast because they only had 2 rooms they were renting. I took it down to 1, but I did get to live with my parents as a grown up, which is a wonderful thing too. It's nice to be able to have that relationship.
That's an absolute great segue into Diana's talking about her introduction to the book that some of you have picked up this evening. This is your most autobiographical work to date.
Oh, the Joaquin forward. Oh, yeah. Well, now that is an interesting book, The Life and Adventures of Joaquin Murrieta, the celebrated California bandit, I think it is. The editor, whom I've never heard of before, and who works for Penguin Random House, emailed me and said, I am the editor of the reprint library, and we are reprinting this wonderful, weird book, that was originally published in 1854.
Wow.
And you can see the size of the book. About 1/3 of that volume is actually a foreword written by someone else about the publication of the book, and it's just as entertaining as the book itself. The gentleman who wrote it, James Roland Ridge, was half Cherokee. His father was a Cherokee, and in later life he sort of assumed that identity and claimed that his father had been killed by it wasn't clear who killed him, but he took offense at this, and was therefore belligerent against white people and so forth, even though he was half white. This is very early identity politics. He was kind of confused. But anyway, he took to calling himself Yellow Bird at that point. But he went on working as a journalist for sort of the yellow press in California and wrote sensational stories about the history of California. Well, he became extremely interested in Joaquin Murrieta, who apparently was an actual person, but it's not quite sure which actual person he was, because there were at least 5 different men who went by that name. So you were never quite sure which one was the celebrated bandit. Evidently, this was a great help to the real Joaquin Murrieta, because a lot of other people were taking the rap for the stuff he did. Anyway, this Mr. Ridge got on the track of all of this, became fascinated by it, and having reasonably little success in his other journalistic endeavors, set out to write a saleable book about Joaquin Murrieta, which in fact he did, whereupon it was published and the publisher promptly stole it from him. Yeah, no, really, they said it was a wonderful book, we're going to publish it, and then they went out of business, apparently. And what they did actually was merely to change their name and move 3 blocks down the street, which he found out a couple of years later when they had been publishing the book all this time. Anyway, it goes into a lot of his problems getting the book back and what happened then and so forth. And finally, poor man, he died of what was called softening of the brain, which we kind of think was probably acute alcoholism, but nobody says. Anyway, that, as I say, the story of that is a lot more complicated than what I just told you. And anyway, it sounded like a fascinating book, and John Siciliano, the editor who approached me, said, well, we would like you to write a foreword for this book. He said, because you're Hispanic. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, I'm Hispanic the same way he was a Cherokee, why not? Meaning that the paternal side of my family most definitely is Hispanic. And I say Hispanic rather than Mexican. Mexican is what people in Arizona call anybody who comes from Central or Latin America, basically. Or they did back in the 1940s and 50s when I grew up. Naturally, not all Hispanics are Mexicans. My family, that branch came from Spain in 1679, and a gentleman named Juan Gabaldon came to Mexico City, where he produced 2 male children. One became a lawyer, one became a priest. That's a fun family tradition. Both of them left Mexico City and moved to Santa Fe. Okay, during all of this stretch of time, this was New Spain. These people were all Spanish citizens. They were Spaniards. Okay, they settled in Santa Fe, continued to be Spaniards until 1848, I think, when the Mexican independence was declared. At this point, they did in fact become Mexicans for 30 years. At the end of this time, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed, and we became Americans without moving a foot. So, Hispanic is about covers it. However, evidently, in today's gender and identity politics kind of day, you kind of have to have street cred before you can write about anybody who is not a dead white male. And so evidently I have enough of it to write the foreword to this book. And once I was sort of thinking, well, what am I going to exactly write about? I found the book and its author extremely entertaining and so forth. And I was thinking, where is my angle? How am I going to get into this? What can I actually say about this book that's interesting without just, recapping the story? And so I started thinking about my dad, this being my Hispanic connection and all that. And so it starts out, my dad loved Zorro. Which is true, these days, Zorro and Speedy Gonzales was another of his favorites. That's the little mouse that goes around like, and the thing is that everybody I know who would be called a Mexican loves Zorro and Speedy Gonzales. People who are not, Hispanic, Mexican, etc. are like, oh, racial stereotype, you can't have them. He goes out of the cartoon and showing him corrupt the childhood and so forth. And so, since when does a, identification with iconic virtue become a racial stereotype? I said, all depends on your point of view, huh? That was kind of my point there. So I'm not gonna recap the whole forward for you, thank God for you. But that's my connection to this book.
I just thought some of you might want to know why it was up there on the table, because it says introduction by Diana Gabaldon in type, but it's like 8 piker or something. So, in any case, but that's a great lead in back to Susanna, because we're talking about the French and the Canadians in a different border conflict in the same century that Claire and Jamie first meet, and stay in, actually, the 18th century. So
Yeah,
it's a
actually,
fascinating lesson, and
just a little further up the coast.
right. It is. So tell us how you went from, modern museum curating and fell back into the war of 1760. It was the 7-Year War, right?
The 7 Years' War, yeah, which actually is the First World War, the way I look at it. It was fought over 5 continents, brought in all the major European powers and all their colonies. So the French and Indian War, as people think of it, is really only our colonial side of a greater conflict. And I was born into a family of amateur genealogists. History for me the way I always talk about it is history for me always wore a very human face. I always could place an ancestor at just about any event, not just a battle, but an event. So when you're talking about the Industrial Revolution, that's when my father's ancestors, who were silk weavers and miners in the north of England, that's when they would be moving from, county to county in the north of England trying to find work. And we have a reminiscence of one of my ancestors who said that he remembered hearing the sound of the guns at the Battle of Waterloo because his father was quartermaster supplying the troops. So again, on the fringes of history, and those are the people that interest me. Those are the people.
The people who survive.
Yeah, they are the people who survive. But they're the people that I find so fascinating. The ones that the historians didn't feel, they don't make it onto the page, but they're interesting to me. I always knew that my ancestors who lived on Long Island in the 7 Years' War, I knew that they had taken in at least 2 French officers on their parole of honor, which is such a fascinating concept. Parole of honor, which is when you captured, say, a fort back in those days, what you were taking was all these men and their officers. And you didn't have giant prisons like you have today. So what do you do with all these men before you can exchange them for your captured men who are being held by the enemy north of the border? Depending on what time of year it is, it might be months and months before you can exchange them. If you take them in the autumn and the fall, the rivers are going to freeze up, the lakes are going to be impassable, and it could be months before you can get people across. So you want to keep the officers in command of their men so that their men don't get into trouble. So the system they came up with was parole of honor. Parole being the French word for word, your word of honor. So the officers would just sign a piece of paper saying, no, I promise not to fight you. And you say, very well, here's your sword, here's some money, here's a nice house you can live in, wander around town, just don't leave, don't go more than a mile away without telling us, have a nice day. And you would hope that your officers who had been captured by their people were being treated in exactly the same way. And if anybody knows the musical Hamilton, for example, the Schuyler sisters, their father, Colonel Schuyler, was one of the most celebrated parolees of honor north of the border. The French absolutely loved him. He was feted. He was taken to all the parties and the dances, and he was having dinner with the Governor General of Canada at the time, the French Governor General, and everybody thought he was just wonderful. And when he was finally exchanged back to New York, they missed him terribly. So that it was a very gentlemanly system, and your word meant something. So I knew that this had happened because we had seen we had seen the receipts, we'd seen the history books and the receipts of the payment made back to my family, reimbursing them for the money that they had put out to take care of these French officers, which again was at the end of the war, the French crown would reimburse the British for whatever money they spent taking care of the officers and the captured French prisoners. It was all very, very generous and very cool. I looked up when the last time they used Parole of Honor was, because they tried it in the Civil War, it didn't work so well. The Civil War guys are like, yeah, sure, I won't fight you, give me my gun, come on, you know, so it didn't work at all, they had to stop it. Not so great. But it was actually used for the last time in World War II. There was a gentleman, one officer, and they just found the records of this, an archivist just found the records of this within, I think, the past year or couple of years. He was captured, he was an airman who was captured in Germany, and his mother was ill in Britain, and he gave his word to his captors that if they let him go back to Britain to be with his mother while she was dying, that he would come back afterwards and serve out the rest of his imprisonment, and he did, much to the chagrin of his commanding officers who thought he was an absolute idiot. But his word, again, he'd given his word, and it meant something. It's kind of, I like those people. It's kind of neat. But I knew that had happened, and then it's one thing to see it written down on paper and to realize the practicality of it and why people were doing it. But it's another thing to put people in those situations, and as you grow up and you see what war does to people, and you know, we've been through wars recently, and you know, we lost people in Afghanistan, up in Canada, and people are coming back, and you think, what does that do when you put someone like that in the house of someone where maybe they've lost a son, or their neighbor has lost a son, or a father, or a brother, or what does it do to the officer who maybe lost somebody, or you know, has been injured himself, and how does it work when you put real people in those situations? And my brain just kind of runs with it, you know, and then it becomes one of those things that everything just snowballs and starts tacking onto it, and then before you know it, you've got characters running around in there and demanding to be written about, and one day I was doing my taxes, and
Stimulate creativity.
yeah, well, always stimulate creativity, and I had to dial our tax office, and the man who picked up the phone said, "My name is Jean-Philippe, can I help you?" And I went, "Yes, you can. You just absolutely did." And that's the end of it. So somewhere in the wilds of Sudbury is a man named Jean-Philippe whatever, who does not know that he inspired the name of my character. Although he might now. So I'll get a bill in the morning. But that's how it started.
People always ask, well, where do you get ideas? That's where you get them.
Very long and convoluted. Yeah, they just,
I mean, if your mind is receptive, you know, if you can open yourself to the universe will come out and meet you every time.
But I always like, Diana always says too, that you've got the right idea, because when you have the right idea, the universe does just put these little things in your path. It's like it just gives you these little gifts and lays these little stones in front of you, and you know, and that's what happens. You kind of keep tripping over these things all the time, and you find these books in used bookstores, and it all trends towards the same thing. And you think, okay, I can take a hint. This is the book I'm supposed to be working on. This is what it is, and that's the way it happens.
Especially if you're doing historical research, because that's a question that we're often asked is, how do you start doing historical research? How do you know when you've done enough historical research? Because there is no end to it. You know, you could literally research any given period. You know, you could take a week in New York in 1905 and never come to the end of everything that happened there. It's just how fine-grained do you need to be? What ideas are you looking for? What threads can you pull that you're following through all of this stuff? Now, me, I had for some time been spending time online. This was way before the internet itself actually existed. But I hung around online with something called the CompuServe Literary Forum, which was just people who liked books. There were a few writers there, but it wasn't a writers group as such. It was people who liked books. It was like a 24-hour floating literary cocktail party, which was the ideal social life for someone with 2 full-time jobs and 3 small kids. So that's why I was hanging out there. But because I had been doing this for a couple of years before I started writing my own book, I had seen a lot of people talk about things they wanted to write, things they were writing, etc., and taking careful note, of course, as to how this was done. I saw any amount of people saying, oh, I have this wonderful idea, my great-grandfather was in the Civil War, and I want to write a book based on his life. And of course, they don't know anything about their great-grandfather. They have no idea what his life looked like. But they think, well, I have to learn all about the Civil War first, before I can go any farther. It doesn't occur to them that the story is about a character who is probably not their great-grandfather, who is based on them, and yet that they don't want to go anywhere near that character until they have the context. And that's not how it works. You follow the character, and they will build their context around them as you work. You walk into something and someone is talking or doing something, and you think, oh, I need to know, why did he say that, or what is he going to do next? I have no idea, but I know where to find out. And you pull that thread in, and it tells you a lot of stuff that you didn't even know was there, but which stimulates a lot of other scenes. It's very organic. So anyway, seeing all this happen in front of me, I said, well, I'm not going to do that. I knew one woman who was writing a book on the Third Byzantine Empire, and she sent me the manuscript. It was horrible, but so she fell madly in love with the Third Byzantine Empire and decided that she really didn't want to be a novelist. She wanted to be a historian, so she promptly quit writing novels, which is a really good idea. And went back and got a PhD in ancient history. So you have to know yourself as well as what you're writing. Is kind of the point here. You learn what it is you want, even if you know from a very young age, as we both did, that you want to be a novelist or that you're meant to be a novelist. There's no good way of doing that. My family were supportive, but on the other hand, I wasn't crazy enough to tell them what I was doing either.
No, I still remember. I mean, my poor dad, my dad's an engineer. Everybody got engineers in their family, and I still remember writing a mystery where I didn't know who the bad guy was, and my dad just found that completely difficult to get his head around. But for me, I see it like a film in my head, and everybody's different. Every writer does things differently. I have a writer friend named Julie Cohen who plots out her entire novel in Post-it notes. She writes beautiful, beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, intricately plotted, beautiful novels, and it works for her. That's how she does it. And she has to see it that way. She has to see it. You write in shapes. You write in this like beautiful kaleidoscopic shape, and I write in this like linear movie, and it has to actually start moving like a film for me. And everybody writes differently. Everybody does it in a different way, and that I find that so fascinating that we all have different processes, and there is no wrong way to do it. You just find the way that works for you. But I'm like you. I have to see. I don't know what I don't know till I get there. Like I'll have a character. I'm writing a novella right now, which is totally your fault. It is. No, this isn't. Last time I was here, 3 years ago, I was promoting a book called A Desperate Fortune. A Desperate Fortune, in the historical part, was a Highlander, which I had said I would never write because she does Highlanders so beautifully, and I was never going to go there. I was never going to do a Highlander. And he had walked in, and he was a Highlander, and I was like, and so I kept him in non-Highland garb for most of it. And he's one of my favorite characters. But as I was flying out here, I had my headphones in, and sometimes when I'm playing music, it makes the characters move in a little scene, kind of like an old MTV video. And they'll play a little scene, and then I kind of write down that, and I work it into the book somewhere. So as I was flying out here 3 years ago, I had my headphones in, played a song. He was very fond of the Fray. So it was the Fray song, and he started moving. I know, he really liked them. And he was a difficult character to write, this Hugh McPherson. He didn't talk much, and he was a very difficult character to write. So when he moved at all, I would just, and he started moving in the scene that would have been fabulous to put in the book that was already now printed and on shelves. So, yeah, Diana very kindly took me out for dinner before the event, and I was telling her how frustrating this was that he had done this to me on the plane and done this beautiful scene. And she said, well, maybe it doesn't belong in the book. Maybe that sounds like a novella. And I said, well, I've never written a novella. How do you write a novella? And she said, you aim for a short story. So I kind of had this in the back of my head that, okay, I'll salt it away. And I wrote notes about what he was doing and everything, and I had it away. And then a friend of mine, about 6 months later, a friend of mine named Anna Lee Huber, who writes the Lady Darby mysteries, the Anatomist's Wife mysteries, came to me and she said, I've got this idea. I would love to do a project with like 4 of us writing linked novellas within a book. So it's like Anna Lee Huber, myself, Christine Trent, and C.S. Harris writing. It's like the red violin with a pocket watch. The pocket watch goes down through these 4 people. We want you to be the first novella in it. Do you have an idea for a novella? And I'm like, coincidentally. And I remembered you saying that life just puts things in front of you. So I thought, okay, maybe that's my cue. And I'm scared of writing a novella. I've never done one. Maybe this is my cue to scare myself and try it. So that was 2015. So I had, the idea for it then. My novella was due a year ago, Christmas. I'm still finishing it. Everybody else has finished theirs. They're really good. I've read them. The book itself comes out next year. Mine's the first one. So I'm setting up the entire thing. It's called The Deadly Hours. So maybe I'll be back here next fall to do it. But it's totally your fault. But anyway, to get back to that whole sort of needing to know what you need to know, Hugh would be sitting in the lounge and he'd reach out and pick up the book. And I immediately think, well, I don't know what he picked up. What did he pick up? So then you go looking for what books are around in 1733 that he might pick up in the lounge of an inn in Portofino while he storms state, on his way to Genoa type thing. And then that leads you down a rabbit hole. And, when they're playing cards, it's like, well, what card game would they be playing? And I go into, looking at card games and you end up with quadrille. It's like, well, I've never played quadrille. So then you play several hands of quadrille and it leads you to all these different things. But if you don't do that type of stuff, then you miss little things like in quadrille, there's a variant of it that men like called Surrender the King, which for Jacobites has a whole another meaning that, lets you bring in stuff. So I find the rabbit hole is it's a rabbit warren. I'm down there the better part of my day. So this is why a novella is maybe a 2-year thing. And not, 9 chapters, you would think I would be able to. How long does it take you to do a novella?
Anything from 6 weeks to 6 months. It kind of depends on how long it is. Yeah, my longest novella is in 7 stones. It's called A Fugitive Green. And coincidentally, it was looking for the kinds of books that people would have been reading in the 18th century that led me to make Minnie the daughter of a rare book dealer. And so forth. And so I had a great time looking up all of these old books with Latin titles, which anybody can figure out if they want to Google them.
It's fun.
Do you remember your first short story? I remember.
Oh yes.
Right, Diana sent it to me.
Okay, well, yeah. Well, this is it's actually the fault of something like yours. Someone invited me to submit a short story to an anthology, and it was an anthology of historical crime. And I said, well, I've never written anything less than 300,000 words. Interesting technical challenge, yeah, sure, why not? And so anyway, I started thinking, well, what can I write a short story about? Because, normally I just kind of don't work that way. Everything leads to something else. And I said, well, that being so, I don't want to write a separate story about the main characters in my novel, because the whole thing is linked. And if I create something that has high enough stakes to be interesting, and the story out here will be a stumbling block for the next novel that I write, because I have to take that into account. So, okay, we're not going to deal with Jamie Clare or any of their intimates, but there's Lord John Grey, who kind of comes and goes. He's not firmly attached anywhere because he's in the military. They post him different places, even when he's home in London. He floats between, the straight world and the gay world and so forth. And so I said, okay, we can do something about him because he won't interfere with anything else. And so I wrote a short story. That actually was a short story. It was only 14,000 words. But it was anything under 18,000 is a short story. And there's exactly one short story in that 7 stones. All the rest are novellas, ranging from 30,000 to 50,000 words each. 50,000 is the size of a category romance. So
you get that 50,000 is not. I mean, I guess that's pushing it, that's a novel.
Small for her.
Yeah, because
That's
it's
like
about
an Agatha
it, right?
Christie size novel.
Exactly, exactly what it is, yeah. So you get your money's worth with that book, is what I mean. But what happened with the short story was that people liked it, and they, you know, that, as they tend to do, for some more, okay, write some more about him. And so I said, well, that was interesting, interesting experience, and it kind of opened the door for me, because I was thinking, well, the things that caused me to write that short story are still operant in his life. He can go anywhere. And so in fact, he's moving around the 7 Years' War. That's where all of his novellas are set, but they're set in places from Quebec to Jamaica and other places. And so I started writing the second Lord John, short story just for, amusement on the side. And so I got close to finishing it, and I finally did finish it, and I sent it to Barbara. And I said, okay, here's the second Lord John short story. That's 85,000 words.
I opened up the email and she said, what do you think of this? And I said, it's a book.
That's what my two agents said too. I said, I thought it was a novella, and they said, well, it's not. And so they took it off and sold it along with two other, theoretical quote novels to a publisher for quite a lot of money. And this is where Lord John kind of came from, or developed his own separate career, I should say.
So Susanna, since you talked about being a museum curator and we talked about the house,
Yes.
and we mentioned people lived in it, how do you connect the present day museum curator who's come there
Yes.
with the French officers on parole?
Well, I had a, it's usually over an object or a thing. I had an idea at the beginning, but books get away from you. Like, books become themselves, right? They, you can have the cleverest conscious ideas when you're setting out to structure something, and then the book says, no, I'm not going to do that either. I'm just going to be myself. And I was going to do this structure, try to do this structure where in the present day we would shatter a plate, and then we would go back in the past and see how that plate was shattered. And it was going to be this perfect thing, and that's why sort of towards the beginning you sort of have more of that something turning on an object, a lost button or a lost this. But as we get on, it becomes more turning on weather or turning on a feeling or turning on a something else other than. But it just organically flips. I wish I could say that I plan things more consciously, but the book just takes over and shifts when it wants to, and the characters come up and shift when they want to. And I've learned to just get out of their way and let them do what they want to do. And it just is that subconscious for me. It just, the book becomes what the book wants to be. And the more I muck with it, the more I try to muck with the structure of it, the worse I make it. And even to the point of when I get into the editing stage, there are some times that I can go in and see, okay, well, I've really got a big, there's a big leg in the middle or something like that. I really need to do something here. But sometimes if I try to do that, it destroys the fabric of what I've made, and it just doesn't work as well. So, some people might find something moving really slowly, but if I try to put something in to make it move faster, it destroys whatever thread is building in there, and it's never the same. So I've learned to just let the book be what the book is and move on to the next one and hope that
there's no actual virtue to being strictly structured ahead of time.
No, that's true.
And I had one book where I was getting comments from the copy editor, and one of them said, this chapter is 5 pages long, the last one was 60 pages, is this okay? Which I shortly replied, it's okay with me. And nobody ever complained about it. But this kind of returns to me with emphasis now that they're making a television show out of my books, because they really do have to figure it out ahead of time and structure it very carefully. And what they do is take the books apart into scenes and sub-scenes and quarter scenes. And then they sit down all together in a room and say, well, we got 13 hours here. I think we need to start the first episode here, with Claire doing this. And I want to end it here, I think. What else can we use out of here that will make a complete dramatic arc? And so they take pieces from here and from there, and they write other little pieces that will blend them together, because each of their episodes has to be a complete dramatic arc by itself and be 1 hour long. Okay, my books do not have to be anything like that. And they're not. And I said, when I'm writing a book, I'm God, I can do anything. If I wanted to, have a 60-page introduction and then go like that, I can. And I do. That's
It's a completely different medium. It's the difference between the Lord of the Rings, the books, are completely different than the films because it's a completely different medium. And and I just, like I said, to me, when it gets going, I know when it's right. It clicks when it's right. And the characters move and talk and I follow along and it's just, it's the mythical zone that, I'm in it and I hear nothing else and I'm just there. I'm with them wherever they are. And they make the pace of whatever it is. And if it's going to be a quiet romance, it's going to be a quiet romance. And that I can't make them be more passionate than they are. They are what they are. And if it's going to be a passionate romance, I can't get between them and say, hey, they're going to, it's going to be whatever it is. So I love that about the process. I just love when it's
together. It was more difficult. So last time I did this, I just had to, I had shotguns and things like that, so that kept the modern thing going. But
well, damn Canada.
I know.
Well, we can't go in certain areas of Canada. But,
yeah.
So, Susanna, you were talking about how you see the films.
Yes.
Well, when you see them, do you see the actual characters? So, if you were to see those characters, who would you cast?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a loaded question. Well, see, but the people I would have cast, say for Murrieta back in 1994 are like really old for the parts now. So, and I also think that casting directors are amazing. Casting directors will find these people you never knew about that are just absolutely perfect for the roles. So I see the character, but it's not a actor or anything. The closest I have ever come to seeing an actor as anybody is, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Scottish actor Brian Cox, not the scientist Brian Cox, but the actor Brian Cox who was in Braveheart. He's a Perthshire man, and I have always seen Brian Cox kind of as Colonel Graham. And if anybody ever does anything with Wintersea, it would be awesome if they did it in time for Brian Cox to play Colonel Graham, because he is just sort of my ideal. But he would be a fabulous Colonel Graham. But then I'm sure there are probably 50 other actors who could do that role as well. And it will happen when it happens. If they had made Outlander back when Diana first wrote Outlander, it would not be as perfect as it is now. It really needed to happen.
At 8 years old.
It would have been cute, but it would not be what it is now. And it is absolute perfection now. So it just has to happen when it's so I see the character, I see the person. But not a particular actor, no, it's just a person.
People always ask, well, now that the show's been cast and all that, do you see Sam and Katrina when you write? I'm saying, no, I still see Jamie and her the way they actually look.
There was one question over here.
What happens to characters that you kind of see, but somehow they don't quite make it to the book? I mean, are they hiding in the closet somewhere and somehow they're going to jump out later? Do you ever have characters that have not manifested themselves in a book yet, but they're still kind of walking around in your head?
Let them do whatever they want to do. That's a very good question.
The characters that have not manifested into a book yet?
Are coming.
That are coming? I have a book that I'm about to start called The Vanished Days that is a sort of prequel to The Winter Sea. And it is, again, it's Colonel Graham that is driving it because, this is kind of a nice story for anybody that read The Winter Sea, that likes The Winter Sea. I'm really bad on Facebook when it comes to doing things on a regular basis, but I do like to try to give my readers value on Facebook, and I did discover that the estate of Abercairny, where John Murray grew up, where his brother William and his father obviously were the Lairds of Abergavenny, I discovered that the estate of Abergavenny is still there. The house is not, but the estate is. The stables are still there, and it's still the original family that owns it. So before going to bed one night, I just said, hey, if you like the Winter Sea, you might want to follow, at Abergavenny. And I thought, yay, I did something nice for my readers. I went to bed, and overnight they got a lot of new followers, and they must have tracked it back to my page, and they must have on that page seen everybody, saying, well, I love the Winter Sea, I love John Murray, he's my favorite character. And about 2 weeks later, I got a very nice little private message on my Facebook page saying, hello, Susanna. I am the husband of Anna Murray. Anna is a direct descendant of William, John's brother. And I hope this doesn't get him in trouble, but what he said was, would you like to see what John looks like? Because I had never seen what John looked like. I had read the outlawry certificate for John, and normally when a person was outlawed, there would be the big outlawry certificate from Queen Anne, and on the back of it would be a very detailed description of the person, so that if you ever saw him in the street, you could take him up and put him in prison. But my friend Alison Lindsay, who is the head of the historical search rooms at the Edinburgh Archives, said this was the first one she had seen that did not have that attached to it. And at the time I was really disappointed, and then I got thinking, well, it's probably just as well because I've made him tall and handsome, and we'll probably find he was like 4'2", bow-legged, and yeah, probably not a good idea. But Daniel had gone to his father-in-law's house and taken his cell phone, and he had taken a picture of John's portrait and sent it to me. And I can't share it because it's a private portrait, but he's handsome. And his eyes are greenish gray, the color of the Winter Sea. And I know, so I kind of felt like Carrie. I kind of felt like, well, maybe I'm not so smart inventing all this stuff. And the most beautiful part about all of it for me is that not only has the family been very kind and helpful to me and offered all kinds of assistance to me in my research, but they have also looped me into the emails they have brought in. Oh, the Grahams of Inchbreaky, who used to live next door. It was Colonel Graham's family. They now live, some of them live down in Cornwall, so they've looped them in. The Gordons and the Sterlings, as in Admiral Gordon and Sir Harry Sterling, they've all intermarried over the years. So they're all looped into emails. They are all tremendously helpful to me. Everybody is assisting with my research. And I got an email just last month from Alex Graham saying, I was just up visiting my parents in Crete, and I was over to Abergavenny, and, is there any information you need that, that we can help you with? And it actually just kind of twisted my heart a bit, because I thought, I felt the letters in my hands from this family from 300 years ago, when they did exactly that, when they walked from the one property to the other property over to visit each other. And here they are 300 years on, doing exactly that. And it just made me happy in a way that I cannot communicate to them, that they are still doing this 300 years on. And I'm going over, I try to get over at least once a year, but I'm going over in November to do more research for this book. And I'm actually going to get up to Abergavenny for the very first time and walk where John walked. And it's going to be, I'm going to try really hard to be very calm. I'm trying really hard to be very calm about it. But I'm just so very grateful. And the Vanished Days. So obviously, yes, there are characters in that are starting to form. But they will be, as Diana said, they will be on the page. They're when you get the character, they're going to be on there. There's nobody gets left behind.
Well,
That
sounds like Diana left somebody behind.
I think that's the perfect note to end on. I'm sorry, but I did promise that we would be done before rain. And who knows, that it was supposed to come at 9 o'clock. So reasonably speaking, we should probably thank our authors for coming to join us. for those of you watching it on YouTube, and you can go home and watch this all over again. If you go to the Poison Pen website, look on the homepage, and it'll say YouTube. Amazingly enough, you can click into it and go from there. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask you to stand up and fold up your chairs and move them against the wall. We're going to put the authors at a table here, and we're going to start with the letter A, one person, and then number 1 and so forth, all the way back. So you'll be able to tell what place in line that you've got.